Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Long Game podcast with myself, Ben Scallon, and the triumphant return of Jason Osborne. Welcome back, Jason. Round of
Thank.
applause for the audience of one that we have here physically.
Normally, whenever I'm speaking in front of a crowd, I don't get any more applause than that anyway. So, like, yeah, I'm not feeling shaken by that.
Yeah, how was your time off, and did you feel at all demoralized by the amount of comments begging for Fatima's return? I felt like there was I think it's just the novelty, really. I don't think that, no disrespect
No,
to Fatima, but
no.
everybody wants something new.
When I saw Fatima's face come up on the podcast, I felt my stomach drop. I was like, "There's no way I'm getting my seat back." But then I factored in the fact that I'm stronger, and I was like, "I actually am getting my seat back." No, but in all seriousness, it was a good week. I've detransitioned. I had a change of heart, largely based on my wife's emotional pleas about destroying our family. In all seriousness, what I was doing last week, yeah, it wasn't the restful getaway that I think our viewers might have expected. I was explaining to you when I came back that I was at this great initiative for sort of like young Christians in the public sphere throughout Europe called the Arete Academy. And if there's any young Christian listeners there, I would highly advise they look into it because it's really really beneficial initiative. But it was an action packed week full of prayer and interesting thoughts and whatnot. So a very well spent week, I would say, and came back to the office, so to speak, energized and ready to go, which is I think all you can really ask of a good holiday.
Great stuff. Well, it's great to have you back, and it looks like you haven't had a haircut in a little while. But are you looking forward the next time you get a haircut in Ireland to being berated by the barber about the climate crisis and how we all need to panic and batten down the hatches for imminent apocalyptic environmental destruction? Because as many viewers will, of course, be familiar, there is now a scheme where barbers will be encouraged to talk to their clients about climate related issues while you're getting your hair cut, which is the definition of a hostage audience, really. Like, you can't, and at least you can turn RTE off. What are you going to do? Walk out halfway through the haircut? And of course, you're also sitting there with the implied threat of them vandalizing your head if you decide, making it look like an accident if you decide to push back on any of the Manson family cult talking points that you're currently being force fed.
I did see someone sort of very, very humorously comment on this that we're only a step away from them forcing barbers to change like this all of the terminology they use in barbershops, where now you're going to have to ask for a net zero when you go in. But suffice to say,
instead of a fade, it's like a phase out or something like that.
Suffice to say, though, yeah. Speaking of being away from the office, I mean, I wasn't doing a detox from news or anything. I was looking at news, but I certainly wasn't following it as closely as I would be when I'm working. And I feel like I don't know whether it's just us or whether it's the state of the world or what, but I feel like the headlines are getting crazier every time you turn around. Like, yeah, I looked at my phone. I was like, okay, it's going to be this initiative that's going to pay barbers to start engaging their customers about the climate situation. And I was like, who thought this was a good idea? Honest to God, I mean, I also think that, apologies to any barbers that may be listening, I think this severely overestimates barbers' conversational skills. I mean, I don't know about you. Half the time I go into the barber, the people sitting in the chairs next to me are sitting in silence. I feel like they go in and they're sort of, I don't know, glancing over the TV in the corner or whatever. And I know that it's just the only thing that talking about the climate to your silent customer is going to do is induce an icy atmosphere in the rest of the room. Like, I don't know. Am I supposed to start engaging the guy who's getting his haircut next to me if the other person starts talking about climate to them? They haven't thought this one through. Suffice to say.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it because this is going to make me sound really antisocial and reclusive or sociopathic or something like that. But I actually change barbers regularly because I don't want to build any kind of a relationship with my barber where I have to talk to them because and I hate to say, if there's any of my former barbers listening, my apologies for that. It's not personal. It's just, it reminds me of one of the Roman emperors. I forget who it was. It might have been Claudius or somebody, but anyway, they were asked by a barber, "How would you like your haircut?" And he said, "In silence." That was the. Well, yeah, it's one of the few times in life I find where you can kind of just vibe out and just switch off mentally. Because, and this is self-inflicted. I'm not complaining, it's nobody's fault but my own. But I find I'm typically either listening to a podcast or listening to music or talking to somebody or watching something, or you've always just got sensory input into your brain. And I find that just being able to sit there getting your hair cut and not having to either listen and nod to climate propaganda or get into an argument where I'm having to push back and say, well, no, I don't think that's true. Or, it's just exhausting. Like, why would you want to subject yourself to that? And why would anybody think that this was a constructive way to approach an issue like this?
Well, I know it was just reported, obviously, over it was on a Friday and over the weekend, and I there must have been some collaboration with UCC, who's overseeing the project, that they didn't mention which 4 towns are going to be involved in the pilot scheme, because I think if they had mentioned, those barbers would probably find themselves fairly empty come the project's launch. But I don't know. It's just another one of these instances of we've tried. What's that? How's that saying go? We've tried nothing and nothing works. And I just sort of seeing that.
Nothing and we're all out of ideas.
Yeah, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. It's like, the latest iteration of this is climate conversations in barber shops. Like, who thinks this is gonna make the slightest bit of difference? And I mean, you would have to attribute the fact that they went with something like this, or you would have to consider a scheme like this as evidence of the near total atomization of modern society, that there are so few sort of active and vibrant social networks now that they can kind of plug into, that they have to approach industries and like barbers, whereas you say you literally have a captive audience to try and promulgate this message of people. I mean, if there's ever been a similar scheme in history where barbers were relied upon sort of further government talking points, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, it's very dystopian, isn't it, in a way, which might be, some people would say that's like hyperbolic or something, but I really, like, I'll put it this way. You and I are relatively sociable people. Like, I don't mind chatting with people who I meet in various fora, and you kind of get a nice smorgasbord sampling of how the general public feels about issues. I have never in my entire life had somebody bring up climate change outside of a political context. Like, occasionally, I will concede that occasionally I'll be specifically interviewing somebody about politics, and I'll say, like, what are the top issues for you? And in certain areas, you will get people mentioning climate issues. That does come up from time to time. It came up during the exit poll that I was doing outside a polling station in Dublin for the last general. So that kind of thing does come up. But in just day-to-day life, I've never gotten into a taxi and had the taxi driver bring up climate change as an issue that he's concerned about off the bat, just out of the blue. In fact, quite the opposite. You get people ranting and raving about how much they hate Eamon Ryan and how they hope he hits a banana peel and breaks his neck. Like that's far more common in my experience. So like, it just shows how artificial it is that you have to try and literally socially engineer people to have these conversations, because nobody is doing it or would ever do it naturally of their own volition.
Well, they do say, and I mean, I'm obviously, you're always going to feel inherently ridiculous, and sort of understandably so, to be making comparisons between where you're living to, say, totalitarian systems, because generally the manifestation of totalitarian systems is so extreme that it's very clear when you're in one. But there is that phrase that was coined by I think it was coined by that American author Rod Dreher. He described as soft totalitarianism. He sort of described that as more so what we're seeing in the West. And I think this is very much a sort of a symptom of that, where it is the politicization of everything. It's like, why does your barber have to talk to you about climate change? If it was just some inane, disconnected talking point, you might say, oh, it's harmless enough. But it's the fact that climate is one of the poles around which society is sort of being redesigned. So it's in that sense, it is, while it's funny and everything, it is somewhat sinister because there's a lot more spheres in life than the political. And I'd be a little different to you in that I've absolutely, I don't mind talking to the barber. I know what you mean about vibing out. And a couple of times I've nearly fallen asleep in the barber's chair because it's such a, I don't know, pleasant sensory experience just sitting there or whatever. But by and large, I don't mind speaking to the barber, but there's way more things to talk about than the political. And I mean, you and I definitely get enough of this everywhere else. So sure enough, if my barber brings this up in future anyway, you can count me out. I'll be getting up half my hair cut and going somewhere else.
It reminds me of there was, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard it. It might be like one of these apocryphal stories that there was a Catholic cardinal in like the 1800s who was known for being extremely intelligent. He was like this renowned intellect. I forget his name, but everybody said, "Wow, this guy is such a genius." And he was speaking at conferences all over Europe, and everybody was praising him. And he was constantly petrified that this would go to his head and that he would become prideful and arrogant. And that was like something he was acutely aware of, and it terrified him, the idea of that. So he would, on a semi-regular basis, deliberately make himself look like a moron just to humble himself and ensure that that didn't happen. And so one of the examples I heard was he shaved off half of his beard right before he was supposed to give some important speech. And he went out there and everybody was like, this guy's a buffoon. And again, that helped him to stay on the straight and narrow anyway. So regardless, it would certainly be good for the old humility if you decide to walk off with half a fade. And
yeah, I mean, like, there's a humorous side of this as well, but it's also the fact that, if I remember correctly, the scheme is going to cost about €63,000. And I mean, I know that's a drop in the ocean of government funding, third level initiatives and things like this, but there's a lot of things you could spend that on for a vast number, well, obviously not a vast number in the grand context of the island of Ireland, but you could certainly use that money to make a difference in some serious way. So just another example of the government being completely out of touch with the people it's supposed to be governing. I really feel, and we're going to be getting into tariffs shortly, but we're clearly living in a time of pending economic hardship. And I think, if you want to position yourself in the worst possible light ahead of that, it's with frivolous initiatives like this. And I know, a climate zealot will say it's not frivolous, but it's like, I think if you're in any way connected to reality, it is.
It is. And I think in the context of the tariffs and the fact that we are probably heading into an economic disaster zone, I saw Lucinda Creighton was on The Week in Politics over the weekend on RTE. She made the valid observation that what we're probably not going to see is all of these companies from the US leaving immediately overnight. Obviously, it takes a lot of planning and restructuring for a company to move countries, especially to like a different continent. You're dealing with lots and lots of bureaucracy and paperwork and logistics. So it's not like Pfizer is going to be out of here tomorrow, but there will certainly be a lot less investment coming in that's new, so that will start to grind to a halt quite rapidly, and then you will no doubt see a incremental pulling away from the country. And so in light of that, it is absolutely essential that we do get things like waste under control and start to stop the constant hemorrhaging, because up until now I feel like we've lived in this kind of deluded fantasy world where we act like money is all just monopoly money that isn't real, and it doesn't matter if you end up spending 50 grand on making your barber try and propagandize you about crap or any number of other outlandish wasteful things. Because like, as you say, like the sum of money is not huge, but it is when you do that a million times. Like if you're looking at somebody's bank statement, if somebody's like, I'm broke, I can't afford to make ends meet, and you're looking at their bank statement, like ordering Deliveroo on its own might not be a crippling. Like that might not be what did them in, but it's the mindset of constantly ordering Deliveroo every day, 3 times a day, and having 17 different streaming subscription services and this and that. It's that idea and that way of thinking that will kill you financially. And I feel like we're in that position just at a national macro level where we've just been so used to, oh, sure, the money is, we're good for it. We can afford to spend it on absolute nonsense and we don't have to account for every single cent.
Yeah, I know, and like, I mean, this is also the point that while it's not a massive amount of money in terms of like state spending, in the grand scheme of things, we've spoken before about how we've sort of got a government that's just sort of addicted to PR losses, in the sense that, like, look over at the US at the moment and what they're doing with the Department of Governmental Efficiency, which is that in the grand scheme of American public finances, a lot of the sort of problems they're uncovering are, again, not massive spend compared to the money that America has to spend, but they just look so bad oftentimes that it's like, people really need to start understanding the importance of narrative and the importance of image, I suppose, in the public square. And this is very, I mean, we may well get into this when we're talking about tariffs shortly, about the way in which, it doesn't seem to so much matter in Ireland because there are no alternatives. So it's kind of like, who else are you going to vote for? But I do feel like we have this sort of government that's sort of addicted to just, I don't know, taking these gut shots every so often, where it's like they do these stupid things and like they get understandable and reasonable criticism. And then sure enough, there's another one comes along shortly. And I mean, should also point out that on a previous episode, you and I think we're both in agreement that it's an inherently conservative position to be genuinely reasonably concerned about the state of creation, about the state of the world, in a reasonable way. Like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be encouraging my kids to, like, yeah, not litter, to live pretty, sustainable lifestyles that, like, and I don't mean sustainable in the sort of, modern buzzwordy sense of the word, but just in the sense that, you don't need to be buying things all the time. That's not going to make you happy. You don't need to be ordering Deliveroo every second night. You don't need to be subscribed to every streaming service, but actually there's some wisdom, as indeed long religious traditions have told us, of being happier with less and things like this. So I think that's all, inherently conservative and all to the good. And I think you'd have a lot more public goodwill and a lot more buy-in, indeed, from the people government need to win over if they got back to some base. I think you need a massive return back to basics on this.
That's the thing that I've got a friend who he's on a very good income. Let's just put it that way. He's in kind of like the tech sector, and like he's a peer of mine. Like I went to school with this guy, so he was talking to me very candidly about how much he earns and how much is taken in tax. Like he paid a good salary in tax, if you know what I mean. Like
I was just going to say, he was just using this to dunk on you, knowing that you work in journalism, and journalists have it famously. He's like, bro, I pay more in taxes than you earn in 3 years.
Yeah. Well, this guy, he was just talking about how it's excruciating to pay tax knowing that it's going to be wasted on absolute crap. He said that he would be more than happy to pay those kinds of rates. I mean, look, no, he wouldn't be more than happy. Nobody wants to pay that. Yeah. But like, he would be able to stomach it and not want to vomit if he knew that it was probably going to go to something that was relatively productive. But when you see headlines like this, you go like, really? Like this is what you're wringing me dry for? Is this garbage? Like, are you for real? And I feel like maybe I'm wrong. Is there any political party that's offering tax cuts to people? I know we're kind of getting a little bit off topic and this is sort of a tangential issue, but every single party that I'm aware of, even including ones that would be more kind of conservative leaning, like Independent Ireland, and I could be wrong, I'm not a forensic expert on all of their policies, so I'm open to correction here. I feel like the standard is kind of more spending with a lot of parties, or we need to allocate the spending better and we need to redirect it to this other initiative that's more important in their view. But you don't get a lot of people saying that we need to cut spending and roll it back and actually just start letting people keep their own money instead of the government constantly hoarding ever more doubloons and spending it on this or that project, whether it be good or bad.
Yeah, I don't know. I can really even give them more credit if they were sitting around in rooms lined with gold and sitting atop piles of like public finances and things like this. But it's obviously
Oscar Donahue is just like lying on a bed of money every day and just
well,
deciding what to do with it, like just in the National
like
Church.
no, I had the unenviable task prior to the election of going through the leftist parties' manifestos. I don't know how I drew that short straw. I think I read People Before Profits manifesto, Labour, Social Democrats. Very much what you were saying. You know, they might have talked about shifting tax intake from one area to another and things like this. But yeah, very much the order of the day was more spending, more spending, more spending, and in that they're not particularly out of step with not overly out of step with a lot of the government parties and things like this. So a cynic would say that in an age of sort of growing dissatisfaction with the status quo, state spending is a good way to buy votes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the thing as well. Like it's one thing you can complain about politicians all you want, but it's the public who demand increased investment in X, Y, and Z. Like one of the reasons people like having a minister in their constituency is
Mm-hmm.
because it is assumed that the minister will then open more sports clubs or whatever, that kind of stuff, which is in a sense like like it's democracy. People are getting what they want, but it also means that you get these weird policy announcements or press releases that I think Irish politicians view spending money as the same as achieving something when it actually isn't at all. You can,
Yeah.
if you're talking to me about healthcare, if you press the minister for health on healthcare, whoever that minister happens to be, invariably they'll say, oh, well, we invested this much in mental health services and we invested this much in, and then they stop there and they kind of expect that to be a kill shot that proves their point. Show me the waiting list, show me the targets that you met, show me the results that were garnered as a result of that spending. I don't want to
Mm.
know that you spent, I don't care if you spent to 3 times the national budget on whatever. If the services are worse, then the services are worse. That's the important part. But again, I think both politicians and to an extent the public have this mindset that spending is good in and of itself. And I don't think that's the case. And I think we're going to run into a brick wall very soon if we maintain that mindset over the next couple of years as the public purse starts to tighten.
Yeah, well, speaking of the cause of that public purse tightening, we did want. Well, I don't know if we even wanted to touch on tariffs so much as we can't help but touch on tariffs because it's all anyone and their mother is talking about. I walked out of the house earlier and this bloody pigeon started talking to me about it. I was like, bro, enough with the tariffs. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like we're essentially engaged in World War III for nerds at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit it's a little bit grim in the sense that there were so many people in that Sunday Thinks or Ireland Thinks poll that came out on Sunday. I think 1 in 5 people said that they're genuinely concerned that they're going to lose their job because of all this.
Wow.
It's obviously pretty horrible. And I would say that's also not a crazy, unfounded assumption either. They probably are right to be concerned to a certain extent, unfortunately. And as you know yourself, like part of a central part of economics is that so much of economics is to do with perception, and what people think largely dictates the market. So even if Trump has a master plan that's going to work and he's thought it all out and it's perfect, if everyone in the world thinks it's a calamitous disaster, it kind of is, because they will make decisions as consumers accordingly that will have a detrimental impact on the global economy. So, yeah, even if you fully back Trump and his plan and you think he's got, trust the plan, as they say, he's got it all figured out, and he's
Yeah.
playing 58 dimensional tiddlywinks, you're still probably looking at a lot of devastation, unless he pulls back at the end. I'm not an economist, so I don't want to speak too authoritatively about issues which are not my area of expertise. But you would have to say that the anxieties that people are feeling are probably not unjustified.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I was kind of joking when I was saying World War. Well, I mean, it is World War III for nerds, but it's also the case that it is massively, massively impactful what's taking place at the moment, and it is going to shape not only economics going forward, but it's also going to shape geopolitics potentially. Because I can't remember whether we said it on a previous episode or whether it was a conversation I've had since then about how it's pretty much guaranteed that America could win in a trade war with any given country if it decided to take that on. But to take it on with the whole world at the same time, essentially, is it's essentially just opening up a can of worms. It's impossible to say which concrete outcome this is going to have, but there's a variety of potential outcomes it could have. And I mean, on a practical level, that as we've sort of, I think the worst case, and that's which is pretty much guaranteed in every outcome, in every scenario, provided this isn't sorted out, is people losing jobs, goods getting more expensive for people. I don't think even if you're a Trump supporter, you should be a triumphalist about this. I think that you can certainly advocate, like, to lay out the strongman Trump position, maybe to put it this way, you would say that what he's trying to do is essentially bring manufacturing back to America and recoup perceived losses in terms of your trade relationship with other countries. Again, that's, I'd say, that there's the way they view the world, whether or not you think that's accurate. I'm sure that's sort of, as I say, the strongman MAGA position in terms of what they're thinking. And even if that's the case, I mean, okay, if that was the case, say, that could be good for your average Joe in America. If manufacturing comes back to America, if they recoup losses, and I don't know, it ushers in an era of decent prices or whatever, and that's highly, highly up to be doubted, to put it that way. But at the same time, there's lots of people of goodwill all around the world. I mean, you and I would certainly be fond, I think, of the going after, just to use shorthand that everyone understands, insane woke policies in the federal institutions in the US. I think that is a clear good. I think the sort of warming up to the pro-life lobby, clear good. There's loads of social things Trump is very good on. But it's also the case that by his sort of international behavior, I would say he's made it harder for people like, and some of our viewers may well disagree with me here, but I would say he's nearly made it harder for conservatives, or however you want to label people abroad, to take effective action nearly in their countries. Because I mean, same Ireland Thinks poll, what was it, show that Trump has in Ireland a 15% approval rating or something like this, which I would imagine prior to all of this, it may well have been higher, even if only, not necessarily because, Irish people were more conservative or whatever, but, largely because they weren't necessarily directly being impacted by Trump's decisions and things. So it's all just to say that in swinging with a big stick as he is at the moment, you risk an awful lot of collateral. And, as I say, his most ardent supporters will say that it's worth it. But I think you genuinely have to be his most ardent supporters to think that. I think that there were probably slower and steadier ways to institute good institutional change, not just in the US, but across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I remember years and years ago, Leo Varadkar was talking about, when he was the Taoiseach, he was talking about Ireland's 12.5%, as it was then, corporation tax rate. And he said that it's very good that all of us political parties agree that the corporate tax rate should stay the same and it shouldn't change, because even just the threat of it changing would create volatility and instability, because companies would get nervous and think, oh, well, like, we need to plan for the future. And that's obviously very ironic coming from him, given that they then, a couple of years later, did change the corporate tax rate to 15%. So that he literally just smacked himself in the face with a pie. But regardless, the point he made at that point was accurate, in the sense that a huge part of running a business is planning into the future, knowing that things are going to be the same tomorrow as they are today, relatively
Mm-hmm.
speaking. Nothing is ever static, but within reason. And so Trump's approach to pretty much everything, which he's done very effectively, and I'm not criticizing him for this because it works clearly, like
Mm-hmm.
he's been extremely successful in many domains, is um manufactured chaos and volatility, which keeps other people on their toes. It throws people off balance, and that's good in many domains. Like when it comes to
Yeah.
geopolitics and international affairs, uh, when he killed your man Qasem Soleimani of Iran, that was like a shocking, astonishing, shock and awe moment for the Iranian regime because they never thought he would go that far. He'll just come out of nowhere with some kind of crazy move that you weren't anticipating, and then it keeps people guessing and thinking, "Oh, would he? Would he not? If he makes a threat, is he going to follow through on it?" You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can't get a read on this guy, and so that's helpful if you're a company who's competing with other companies, or if you're a geopolitical actor and you're dealing with hostile powers. But when it comes to the economy, I'm not convinced that same strategy works because now it's gone to the point where whether Trump's approaches are good or they're bad or whatever, you can have whatever opinion you want on it. It's undeniably radical. He's taking drastic measures, either for the
Yeah.
better or for worse. And businesses don't like that because it messes with their entire ability to plan into the future. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Are you suddenly just going to, as a power move, put a 50% tariff on some essential product that I need to run my business? Like I can't operate in this environment. I need to know
Yeah.
things are going to be relatively secure going into the future. And so I think I don't know that his typical approach is applied to this situation with the same effectiveness he usually sees.
Yeah, and like as again to voice that position that you've heard out there, and I've heard it quite extensively, particularly from sort of people on the disillusioned side of the political spectrum who would reasonably say that the sort of system that we've been with for the past while is broken. If you're in a two-income household and you can't afford to buy a house, something's got to give here, and that's increasingly the situation, not just in Ireland where it's sort of reaching a fever pitch, but elsewhere. And so I think there is a sort of accelerationist, nearly to put it that way, mindset out there amongst a lot of young people who would be more than happy to see some eggs broken to make an omelet. But I think, again, at the risk of sounding unpopular, neither you or I would probably be in that accelerationist category, such that I think that sort of by all means cut out waste, and indeed um, set about resetting international trade relations in a way in a way that you like. But this is just, as I say, such a dynamic way to do it. I do think it'll be interesting. This week will be quite telling because obviously it was, I think, Netanyahu's in the White House today, and I think he's due to sort of have meetings with other world leaders this week. And what people are observing is this week is whether or not he's willing to sort of yield on those tariffs if those countries yield to him. And again, this would be very much in keeping with the common understanding of him, which is that with him, it all comes down to use the title of his book, "The Art of the Deal," such that by essentially putting people's back to a wall, you're going to get the best possible deal. And I mean, you're certainly getting that panicked sentiment from media. I mean, even aside from the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, and all of these things, I actually don't think I've ever. I don't know about you, but I feel like I haven't seen the news this panicked in a long time. And I think that's probably because this has far more sort of direct purchase on people's living standards in the Western world than any of those aforementioned issues do, despite the fact that they are obviously a lot more violent and things. Um, so suffice to say, this week will be very interesting because if you start seeing countries coming to him and offering extremely favorable trading partnerships to the US, then you would have to say that, yeah, this is a gamble that's played off as far as he's concerned if he starts sort of pulling back a little bit on this. But I think, if I remember correctly, he's got April 9th as the deadline for starting to impose, as well as the tariffs he just imposed, sort of country specific tariffs as well. As I think Bill Ackman, that American CEO, who's been very supportive of Trump this whole time, he's been thoroughly in Trump's corner. He said that'll be essentially the equivalent to an economic nuclear winter. So again, neither you nor I are economists, but you don't have to be some progressive part of the system to think that this is an incredibly risky strategy that he's implementing here. If indeed some might say you can call it a strategy. I think a lot of people are critical of even how this was all formulated. So,
but then again, with this guy, you never know. He could be planning the whole time to pull back at the 11th hour and to not even go through with it. And as you alluded to, like, it could just be scare the absolute crap out of people. And then when they're desperate for resolution, then he goes, okay, we'll talk. I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised, given that it's the kind of thing he has been known to do many times in the past. And of course you go, well, he seems very determined this time. Well, yeah, I mean, you have to make the other person believe that you're serious if you're going to make something like this effective. If they know ahead of time he's going to pull back, then they're not going to take it seriously. It has to be a credible threat. So, yeah, I don't know.
I would, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, I would add either way, we were horrendously positioned for like whatever approach he was deciding to take to this being a small open trading economy. Like, there was no way we were going to come out of this as winners. I mean, the only way you could possibly come out of this as winners is if we had, built up a very strong native industry that obviously wasn't so dependent on American foreign direct investment. And if we, I don't know, spent things that would last us into the future, even in times of economic hardship, like better infrastructure, all of this, but we didn't do that. And you really, I would hope that regardless of whatever the outcome is here, we take this as a understanding the sort of the volatility of the world that we live in, because I feel like we very much believed that liberal dream over the past 2 decades in particular. And this has shown that it can end, and that we live in an interconnected world, and we can't be complacent. Like you looking at this, as Paul said, people's jobs are at risk. The country's ability to spend money on vital things is very much at risk here. So, if this has to be the time for change.
I mean, doesn't that just seem so unnecessary and stupid, though? Like, I would have thought years ago, long before any of this was even on the horizon. I remember, like, as a kid, when I heard about Ireland's economic model when I was, I don't know, like 11 or something, hearing about this for the first time. One of the first things, and I'm not saying this, I'm some kind of like political genius, the opposite. I'm saying like
this economic savant.
Yeah, exactly. I don't mean to like, I mean the exact opposite, that even a child, any kind of ordinary person could figure this out. I was thinking that seems a little bit risky, or wouldn't you think that we should have our own stuff going on as a backup plan just in case? Like this I remember I always thought that it would make so much. Of course, you don't want to turn your nose up at the multinationals. Of course, it's a great source of income.
Yeah.
And them leaving would always be painful, no matter what we had going on, because you're who's going to say no to billions and billions of euros annually? Of course, that would be a hit to us in any possible world. But yeah, the idea that you would have a setup like that and then just sit there with your thumb up your ass doing nothing until all of a sudden they're all yanked out from under you and it's too late, and then you go, oh shit, and then you're like scrambling to try and rectify that situation after the fact. It's just mind-blowing incompetence. But what else can we expect, I suppose?
Yeah, and I mean, this sort of unfortunately puts you into bed, I suppose, with the EU in a sense, in that I've seen a lot of people, I think Conor McGregor foremost among them, saying it's key that we get out of the EU. And I think, as some people have probably rightfully pointed out, given that there has been such distaste for Ireland's economic model expressed over the past couple of months by members of the administration, foremost among them Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who's called Ireland a tax scam. And again, there's an element of realpolitik required here, because these are all perfectly disagreeable sentiments on their part, but this is how they see the world, and these are the people you're having to negotiate with. So it's all just to say that, if we were to exit the EU, there's a very good reason to believe that they would have just slapped tariffs directly on Ireland, and you wouldn't have been part of a negotiating bloc, which would have been absolutely if the current situation is a disaster. I don't even know what you would call that.
Yeah, no, you're dealing with apocalypse territory then. But I mean, when it comes to our native industry, like this, everything I'm about to say here, I'm not saying any of this would be an adequate replacement for the money we're going to lose. It wouldn't be, but it's a stream of income that we would have had that we could call our own. Is we used to have a native sugar beet industry up until the early 2000s. In Carlow, there were these sugar beet plants. That was done away with as a result of EU regulations and policies. So now we don't have, Ireland imports all of our sugar. We don't have any sugar anymore. We used to have the whole peat, various bug related products, turf and things like that. We stopped that because of climate endeavors. Obviously Irish agriculture has been in decline as a result of mostly climate targets and, various ecological policies that we've implemented have hurt that, as have fishing quotas. We're an island nation and we have a pathetic amount of fishing quota in our own waters, which is a bit preposterous. We had that whole ship decommissioning scheme where we were literally paying people to destroy their boats. Like all of these examples ramping up. Then we had years of COVID, which kicked the hospitality industry in the ball. Yeah. And then right after COVID, the Ukraine war kicked off, and then we turned a huge chunk of the hotels in the country into iPass centers, which in turn shafts restaurants and other local tour guides and things like that.
To the very concrete point that you see, what was it, February this year, down 30% tourism wise on 2024. I know the percentages all matter here, but 30% is a huge amount. You're not to be hyperbolic, but you're not far off 50% there. I know it takes some time to get there, but I could not believe that stat when it came out.
Shocking. So not only have we not invested properly in setting up our own new native industries, we've allowed the ones that we did have that were natural kind of support nets for us to crumble and decay. And I was talking about this in an article last week. And again, as I said before, I'm not saying that this would be a replacement for farmer or something. I know the money we would make from this would be less. But just as one example of a million that you could give, I've always thought, entertainment is one of the biggest industries in the world. These streaming companies make billions every single year. It's huge. Everybody's watching Netflix and, Amazon Prime and all this kind of thing. Ireland has a huge diaspora. We're an English-speaking country. We're a country that has a whole swath of homegrown A-list actors and actresses, people like Brendan Gleeson, Liam Neeson, etc., and Cillian Murphy, you name it. And we're a country that's known for being overrepresented and punching above our weight in the arts. We have some of the greatest poets and so on. What would have stopped us from turning ourselves into the Hollywood of Europe, in the sense that you could have films about Irish Celtic mythology where you have Michael Fassbender as Cuchulainn and he's doing flips over Connacht men, killing them with spears, and then almost like a Game of Thrones kind of mini series of Anton Bocolinia.
Mm-hmm.
And you could then have all the Irish Americans would watch that, and just people in general who like cool ancient stuff. And then you could tie that into tourism, where you could do a bit about the Battle of Clontarf, and then you could set up a whole tourism industry around that, where people who saw the movie would then be able to go and see Clontarf, and here's the site of the battle. Again, these are just little specific examples, but we haven't done that. There's no reason why we couldn't do that and why that couldn't be hugely successful. And it will be an Irish grown business that no one could take away from us and will be a guaranteed source of income that would benefit us regardless of what geopolitical vicissitudes unfold with tariffs and the rest of it. Like, I don't know. I just find it, I find it bizarre how underutilized some of our natural abilities are and the opportunities that we've just left on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, as you said already, that these wouldn't be replacements for the foreign direct investment we'd be getting. But it's also the case that it's like, yeah, we knew this would be an extraordinarily lucrative strategy, but everyone also knew that it was very unstable. And the whole point is that instability is sort of coming home to roost now at this stage. And it may well, in hindsight, have been a better decision to go with sort of the less lucrative, at least to prioritize the less lucrative but stable side of things over putting all of your eggs into this basket, which we undeniably have. Yeah, I mean, just in an effort to get your sort of Irish arts sector going. One of the tweets I put out like 2 years ago, and I don't have many followers now, but hardly had any followers then, that I was sad RTE didn't pick up and commission for a season. I was saying that I can't wait for the day that the Dublin Metro finally is completed and they decide to commission some sort of series about I don't know, the criminal underworld, quite literally under Dublin. Because I was like, crime is so bad in Dublin now. Can you imagine what the subway tunnels would be like if they finally built that? And I was saying I got the perfect casting for it. The Gardaí have a unit specifically dedicated to these hellish tunnels, and Paul Mescal, who's obviously one of Ireland's up and coming actors, is new on the beat, and he joins Barry Keoghan, or Keown, I should say. I can't remember how he spells his last name. Barry Keown, who is a veteran of living in the tunnels, and he spends all his time down there because he always seems to play these kind of creepy, impish characters. I was like, I don't know. I think that would get commissioned for like 3 or 4 seasons at the very least. I mean,
it would almost be like an Irish version of Metro 2033 or something. Got like mutated creatures down there. Like the synthetic opioids have turned junkies into some sort of like, you know, superhuman creature that you have to evade down in the tunnel. So yeah, I think that's potential. We should see about crowdfunding this or something.
And then, now that I've got precisely 500 more followers, I should probably post about it again. So just circle back on this idea. Lest we go over time, because you and I are avid clock watchers. You've infected me with your OCD regarding stopwatches and whatnot. You sent me a clip, because we do like discussing cultural things, and I think this certainly fits the bill. You sent me a clip of this woman. What was her name? Paige Connell, I think. And lest people think this is frivolous or whatever, you and I are numbers men. We look at at least when it comes to cultural content, we like seeing the engagement people are getting on their videos and things, and sort of discussing we like discussing cultural content based on those things that go properly viral. And I think,
yeah, because sorry to interrupt you, but like what we're about to say, you might hear this and just think, okay, she's an ageist, but who cares? Like, there's all kinds of people on the internet ranting, saying stupid stuff 24 hours a day. Why would we focus on this? This video, as of the last time I checked, had over 100 million views on Twitter alone, and then probably many millions more on other platforms. I can only assume.
Yeah, actually got Instagram and I think TikTok and all these as well.
Yeah, so this is immensely relevant. Like, this is being consumed and being agreed upon and disagreed upon by millions and millions of people all over the world. So it is relevant to talk about for that reason.
You take it from here, because you're more familiar with Miss Connell's work than I am.
Yeah, so it's this American influencer. I'm not hugely familiar with her work, but she seems to basically just be like a mom influencer, where she talks about how to efficiently manage having 4 kids and how to get them all dressed and out for school in a more timely manner. You know, that sort of thing, like different logistical mom stuff. That seems to be her general area of expertise. So she produced this video in which she's talking about how she almost divorced her husband a few years prior. And so you think, well, what could this man have done to incur?
This brute.
Yeah, I mean, he must be an outrageous pig, right? Like, what did he do? Did he cheat on her? Did he? I mean, who knows what? So you watch the video, and in it, she's talking about how, by her own account, this is her description of him. He was a lovely, caring man, super hands on with the kids, did housework. She had mentioned in other videos that he cooks dinner for the family every night, even though he works full time. And he doesn't just work any job. He's a utility lineman, which is the job where you climb up the electrical pole and you're fixing wiring, which is in the top 10 most dangerous civilian professions in the
Risk
world.
getting your head blown off in doing so.
Yeah, like these guys get killed all the time because not only are you at risk of being shocked with like lethal amounts of amps, even if somehow miraculously you get shocked and you survive, you then fall off a telephone pole and land on the pavement. So it's a really dangerous job. This guy does that full time. Then he comes home and cooks dinner for the family. So this is the kind of guy you're talking about. By her description, she says he was a great guy. But she said that after she had another kid, she had said, like, can you take up more of the chores? Can you do the dishes? Or can you, just help me more with laundry and things like that around the house? Because I'm really stressed out here. I think they have like 4 kids and I'm just struggling to manage. And he said, no problem. Absolutely. More than happy to step up and do an extra bit if it makes your life easier. And then she says he was great for a while. And then he started to slowly kind of become a bit more patchy until one day she needed to find like the baby's bottle and it wasn't washed. And there were like a couple of things that just hadn't been done that she had expected him to do. So she rang him up and said, like, here, what happened? And he said, oh, I'm really sorry. I was running late for work and I just had to dash. And she said at that moment, she felt like I need to divorce this guy, or I'm seriously considering divorce, because she said, I felt so unheard and unseen, like he doesn't even care, because now her words were, now I'm going to be late for work almost because, I have to run around cleaning up your mess. And anyway, it was, this is naturally, as I mean, from the tone I'm speaking in, you can probably get a sense of how I feel about this, but I figured
Ben is entirely on her side. He thinks she should dump his ass.
So I figured I might kick it over to you, Jason, before the veins in my forehead become any more visible. What do you
again, just in case people wonder why we're discussing this, I would also say we're probably somewhat abnormal being married in our 20s in Ireland. And I think you and I are both very interested in marriage as an institution and very interested in what makes it work and what doesn't, largely because, well, I think it's a really good thing, and I think it's going to contribute when it sort of becomes popularized again, and not just popularized in terms of, do it, but sort of people get interested in it and start figuring out what makes marriage work and things like that. And I'm not sort of being all prideful here saying, oh, look at me with my, 3.5 year long marriage or anything like this. But I don't think you need to be married for 20 years to acknowledge that some things work better than others. But a couple of things that stood out to me were that, again, first of all, I think she was married when she did this video, or she said when she started having her divorce doubts at that stage, they'd been married for 17 years and they had 4 kids. So clearly a lot more experience than me. But that said, if I might be
sorry to interrupt you as well, it should be noted they didn't actually get the divorce. She says that the end they figured it out and now they're fine and they're together and everything, but that she thought about it. So just to add that context, it pulled back from
in everything, I think nearly in everything that I do, or at least that I try to do, and I think this sort of part and parcel of hopefully being a good Christian is you try to figure out, how to get renewal out of a situation, how to unify in a good way rather than just sort of, criticizing constantly and not contributing anything particularly positive. And in that spirit, I was watching this video and again, to boldly offer some advice, this couple that have been married way longer than me, dunking on your spouse to, in this case, hundreds of millions of people is just like, I don't know, if I came home and looked on X and I saw a video of my wife on there talking about how she was considering divorce because I'd forgotten to take some things out of the dishwasher a couple of times, I'd be like, okay, I have much greater cause here for difficulty in this relationship than you do. I And as well as that, like she kept saying these things that were like bizarrely. She said at one point in the video that she was undervalued. She kept saying things that undervalued him massively. Like she said something like, yeah, when she was saying she felt unseen and unrespected. She also said at one point that she felt unvalued. And it's like, talk about feeling unvalued. You're out there working a crazy, dangerous job that by all accounts provides for your family and you're great on top of that. But, you got to the point of potential divorce because you didn't take things out of the dishwasher. And so, yeah, I do feel like it's worth addressing because we undeniably are living through times of gender wars and where each sex is sort of increasingly seeing the other as trash in online conversations and things. I mean, plenty of people will recognize this, like I think genuinely reprehensible figures like Andrew Tate and whatnot. But there's not enough sort of calling out of it on the female side, and I would say this is an instantiation of this being a problem on the female side, where she puts out these videos that are very kind of therapizing and talking about how do this in your marriage, men, listen to your wives this way, and it's like, all the while she's undermining the guy that she's actually with. I thought it was a perfectly inadvisable video to be putting out there anyway. And if I were her husband, I'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah, and by the way, that would be the same if he went on TikTok or Instagram and said, "Oh man, my wife, like I was this close to leaving her because of X, Y, and Z." Like, even if your critique is completely justified and valid, even if what they did is genuinely wrong, that is not the forum to have that. Like, I even kind of think you shouldn't vent about your spouse, even to like your friends. I think that that's kind of inappropriate to go to. Like, first of all, if you have a relationship with somebody who you supposedly love, you should first of all take your complaints to them. And if for some reason you're not getting through to them or you feel like you can't for whatever reason, there's very few people, like maybe, I don't know, like your immediate family or something, like there might be certain contexts where if you're having problems at home, bringing in like your family members,
some external arbitrators.
Exactly, yeah, and they can kind of maybe smooth things over, like if you've got a good relationship with them. But yeah, like the last thing you should ever do is go online and start smack talking. Like, I can't think of anything more repugnant than that. And that's assuming, by the way, that what he did is actually outrageous and egregious. Because if you're running late for work and you don't do the dishes one time, because again, I all I can do is base it on what she said. By her account, he was really good. It's not like he's some kind of deadbeat bum who never does anything around the house and she's scrambling around trying to manage everything and there's a totally unequal division of labor. And, then you could understand resentment building up. Then you could kind of at least get why she might have a gripe. But your husband who works full time was in a rush one day a couple of times and he didn't do the dishes here and there, and you considered divorce and blowing up the entire marriage and ruining your children's lives over that? Like, are you for real? It's just like that nuclear overreaction is something to behold.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, no, I really do think sort of reappreciating marriage. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was at a sort of an academy last week, this thing, and I was remarking at that because there were a bunch of other young married guys at it, that we really do live in quite a special time, in that I feel like culturally speaking, marriage has sort of been denigrated for a long time, in the sense that women have always been portrayed as these sort of nagging presences that only really beat down men. And I see loads of memes to that effect still on social media, and certainly Paige Connell isn't really doing anything to dispel that stereotype. And then on the flip side, you've got like the Homer Simpson-esque character who sort of, many portrayals of men in media just, again, being sort of deadbeat, lazy, who just sort of fluke their way to providing for their families and things like this. And I was, all of the young married men that I know at this stage are very, really singing from a different hymn sheet, to put it that way, and that everyone's really genuinely excited to be married, genuinely loves their spouse. And I think that those are, few in number, though they are very good signifiers for the future, because I would be of the opinion that marriage is the foundation of family, and families are the foundations of healthy societies. So I do think figuring these things out is important. And again, even though they're married longer, I'm not one of these relativists who thinks that there's no sort of objective truth in relation to how to make healthy relationships work. And so I think my wife and I, thanks be to God, received lots of good formation and advice from loads of couples that married longer than us, and had great advice to give. And I think this video, by any reasonable standard, would have raised red flags for everyone, because maybe she had some because you and I both well know, being in the sort of young children phase of family life at the moment, that it is tough, and it puts pressure on both spouses in different ways. And you both have to be in communication to figure out how to manage those pressures in your own relationship. But yeah, outsourcing that to social media for clout because she has a lot of followers is just, that's toxic, and that's not going to do anything to sort of warm anyone up to the idea of marriage, but is rather, I think, going to feed into the sort of grievance culture that we've had for bloody ages now, it seems like.
Yeah, because I think as well, part of the problem with everything she was saying was, within reason, if you're keeping score and keeping count of how much work have I done and how much work have you done, and is it about even, and oh no, I'm not gonna, like, she had another video from like a year or two ago where she was talking about how like she cooks her own dinner and her husband makes him, or she makes her own like breakfast and lunch, her husband does the same for himself, and then he cooks dinner for the whole family. And like she seems obsessed with making sure it's like an exact 50 split of like, I'm not going to do one thing more than you do for me. And it just, like, I'm not saying that it's acceptable for one spouse to just sit around doing absolutely nothing while the other person breaks their ass like a slave to try and support the whole household. Obviously, I could see how that would be mentally taxing for somebody. But if, as she describes him, he's a good guy who works really hard and goes to work and he does chores around the house and he has his responsibilities, like, when you're in this like transactional mindset, I think you're already off to a terrible start. Like, there have been periods of my wife and I's relationship where I'm doing more for her than she is for me, for various very legitimate logistical reasons, or vice versa. And at no point did I resent that, where I was like, oh, I'm doing this, this, and this, and you're not doing that, that, and that. Because you're supposed
get your own cornflakes, Megan.
You're supposed to like relish the opportunity to serve your partner and to actually help them and do what you can to support them. Like, I'm increasingly getting to the point where all of this masculine crap and all of this feminism crap is just overcomplicating everything. Like the whole, you hear these red pill guys who are like, oh yeah, and then they're like, women are into hypergamy and like the 2080 rule, and there's the this and the, and they're coming up with all this goofy language. And then again, feminists have the exact same thing, but the inverse. And I'm like, just love your partner, be nice to them, be willing to inconvenience yourself for their good, to a reasonable extent, assuming you both love each other, and you'll be grand. Like, stop overthinking it and overcomplicating it with ideology. Like, it doesn't need any of that. Just love each other. That's the most fundamental plank of this whole operation.
I think the way you and I would see it is that, a marriage can't just be this sort of arbitration between two it's nearly like business partners who both want to get there, who both want to feel equally represented in it or something. It's like, yeah, of course you do have to have some self-knowledge and you have to know what works for you and what doesn't, but it can't be the foundational level on which you're interacting, which is very much what was being communicated in these massively influential videos. Much better.
Sorry to jump, but like, what do you do if your spouse, God forbid, gets into a catastrophic car accident and is in a wheelchair, and you have to mind your kids and do everything for your spouse to the point where they're almost like a kid with even more demands, and you have to do it all on your own? What are you going to do? Like, oh no, I'm not getting equal value out of this relationship. Like, it's not what you're getting out of it. It's not a transaction. It's not like a business partner. This is supposed to be something you love. You know, that it's not about how it can tangibly benefit me in my life. That's not why you marry somebody.
On that note, you and I are going to be launching our marriage ministry this coming summer. No, we're certainly not. Like, maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that 25, 30 years from now. But for now, we're just going to enjoy spouting our opinions on other people's bad marriage takes.
Yeah, isn't it funny? Like when you're because as you say, like I'm 27. You're what, 28?
29 as of like 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Oh yes, absolutely. Happy belated birthday again.
Yeah, thanks, man. Really feeling the love.
So we're in our 20s, married with kids, and that's anomalous. Like, a lot of people our age and younger would probably think, "Oh wow, you guys are like, you know, marriage aficionados or whatever." And it's funny that when you're in like more traditionally minded circles, I feel like a rank amateur who's totally unqualified to speak about a lot of stuff. When you know somebody who has like 10 kids, which I do, you go like, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, just disregard everything I say because, or somebody who's having a 20 or 30 or 40-year marriage, you go, Janie Mac. That's
definitely. Like you like what is it, the average ages are now for getting married? So like 37 for a man in Ireland or something, and what is it? It's either 33 or 35 for a woman. I can't quite remember. But I got married at 25. Like that's like, out of all the guys that I went to school with, it's weird for me. There's this clear dichotomy for me. All my secular friends are still, say, unmarried, and I think there's only one engagement that hasn't come to a marriage out of all of those friends. But then there's like loads of marriages and kids and all the things on the Catholic side. And it certainly can't be said that the Catholic side of things is any wealthier than my friends on the secular side. And I'd say it's the flip side in some cases. So it's just this interesting dynamic. But that's possibly something we'll discuss again, because I think going forward, this is only going to become a marriage, and sort of family formation is only going to become a more important societal factor.
100%. And with that said, we will say goodbye to our podcast family. We're going out for cigarettes. Hopefully we'll be back. But with that said, thank you so much, everybody, for watching as usual, and we will catch you all on the next episode.